Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. Our purpose and passion are simple: to highlight the incredible nonprofits that make our communities stronger. Each episode is a chance for these organizations to tell their story in their words, sharing not just what they do, but why it matters to the people they serve, to their supporters, and to all of us who believe in the power of community. Through podcasting, we hope to amplify their voices, inspire connection, and give them one more tool to impact the hearts of donors, partners, and neighbors alike. This work is made possible through the generous support of our incredible partners: Cap Trust, offering fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations; Western Health Advantage, a local not-for-profit health plan that believes healthcare is more than coverage. It's about caring; CORE, executive leadership and comprehensive support services. They work in it so you can work on it. And Five Star Bank, a local, trusted advisor to community nonprofits for over 25 years. When people talk about homelessness, we often picture someone on a street corner. But the reality is far more complicated and far closer to home than many of us realize. This episode, I sit down with Lisa Culp, the founder and executive director of Women's Empowerment, and Robin Kelly Dutton, a graduate of the program who now serves as chair of its board. Yes, let that sink in for a moment. What started 25 years ago as a vision shaped directly by women experiencing homelessness has grown into one of Sacramento's most transformative pathways out of poverty for women and children. Lisa shares how listening to the voices of women living through homelessness helped build a program that focuses on dignity, employment, housing, and long-term stability. And Robin shares a story that is both heartbreaking and inspiring, going from sleeping on the floor with a newborn and an incapacitated husband to rebuilding her life, launching a career in public service, and eventually helping lead the very organization that helped her rise. This conversation is about resilience, about community, and about what can happen when people are given not just survival services, but a real pathway forward. Lisa Culp, Robin Kelly Dutton, welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely. Glad to be here.
I am excited for the stories we are about to hear. Lisa, as founder and now going into 25 years of the organization, tell us how it came to be that you started it.
I had just returned from working 10 years in Central America, primarily with women and children. And I started working at Mary House, which is a daytime hospitality center for women and children at Loaves and Fishes. And I was struck by how much harder it is to be poor, homeless in the United States than in Nicaragua, which is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Because there, they still had their dignity. They still had family. They still had community. And what the women have told me over and over again is that the process of homelessness strips so much of that away from you. And as I worked at Loaves and Fishes at Mary House, the other story that I heard over and over was, we are so grateful for the survival services that Loaves and Fishes provides. And we want a pathway out of poverty and homelessness for ourselves and for our children. And so I started holding focus groups with women, both at Loaves and Fishes and other places, and asked them what it would take to create that pathway out of poverty and homelessness. So literally, these women created the blueprint for women's empowerment. And community volunteers and community leaders and I implemented that vision. And we started off in a 3-room space behind Goldie's Boutique.
Oh, don't we all know that well? Only because we drive by it on 160, right?
Right. Ask a board member who had to park in that parking lot.
Oh, my goodness.
Who was a development director for a church and bumped into a parishioner. And he said, I'm going to a women's empowerment board meeting. And the guy says, yeah, sure.
Oh, my goodness.
Now we have a 10,435 square foot building with a wonderful place for our child development center, a beautiful backyard, a computer lab, a good sized classroom that can accommodate about 35 students, and, confidential offices where the women can meet with their counselors and their support team people.
Mhm.
Um,
That's
so,
amazing to
yeah.
see what's, I'm sure from your perspective, 25 years ago to today, just having that entire lineage of history
Yeah.
to see, I remember when
Mhm.
to where we are. And the thing that is so interesting for me in a perspective is the mission hasn't changed.
No.
The impact hasn't changed. And you were doing the same thing for women then as you are today, only now you have it on a much broader basis to provide so many more services as a result of 25 years of experience and growth and funding, et cetera, et cetera,
Yes,
et cetera.
it's very true. I
Yeah.
mean, our mission has always been that kind of North Star. And when the housing crisis became so unbearable, we knew we needed to step into
Mm-hmm.
providing housing, which is a huge expense. But there was no way to continue to fulfill the mission if women who were getting jobs couldn't afford housing still. And the same thing happened in 2008 when we had the Great Recession
Mm-hmm.
and so many people were laid off. A lot of programs closed. We grew. We started to have more paid training programs so that the women would have current skills for jobs that had upward mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we've continued to work, is that upward mobility, because on minimum wage, you cannot afford a place to live,
Especially not if you have a child.
especially not if you have a child.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it costs about $28 an hour. You need to make $28 an hour for a 1-bedroom apartment in Sacramento.
Yeah. Add another person to that, and you really are in a
That's
world
right.
of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that so often. I had the ability to go out for the point in time.
Mm,
And it was amazing to me to hear the stories of what people said
yeah,
on why they were homeless.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And so different than the perspective or
Yes.
perception that we've got when we see somebody that maybe has a mental illness on the corner. That's our perception of homelessness. But the reality is the majority of people don't want to be there.
They do not.
They want to get out of this horrible cycle that they've fallen into. And some of the reasons that this happens, and I'm sure we'll get into this in just a minute. Let's talk about who you serve and what the problems are that you're trying to rectify.
So we serve women and children who are experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk of becoming homeless, like they've got an
Mhm.
eviction notice. And we receive referrals from domestic violence centers because between 80 and 86% of the women have experienced domestic violence, and that's the leading cause of homelessness for families.
Mhm.
We work with mental health programs for people who are engaging in trying to help their mental health. Work is something that helps a lot of people's mental health.
Sure, it's purpose.
Yeah, it's purpose. We work with clean and sober programs and living environments because these women have dedicated themselves and they're working really hard on their sobriety.
Mhm.
But mostly we work with women who come and say, I really want to change my life. Because we have found that motivation is the greatest indicator for success. And so if that's where they're at, this is the right time. And they will not be in the same place 9 weeks later.
Let's talk about that. And that gets into the programs of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
What are the programs that you provide? What is it that happens when somebody comes to women's empowerment?
So we have the initial 9-week program.
Tell us about that.
Okay. So that from 9 to 12, they have classes on employment readiness. They have classes on mental health. They have classes on basic health and well-being. So we offer health services, legal services, and most of those come through the classes and then appointments that they make afterwards. In the afternoon, they have classes they're more learning and support groups for domestic violence, for wellness and recovery, for parenting, for cooking and nutrition on a budget. UC Davis comes and provides that one. And then Pipeworks Gym, which is right across the street from us, invites the women to come over and do an hour-and-a-half workout. So it's very holistic and well-rounded. And then they have a support team, which includes a master's level social worker, a housing specialist, a job developer, and probably most importantly, a volunteer career mentor. And a lot of the classes are taught by volunteers, but the message that the volunteers can bring that staff can't is that I'm here because I believe in your power to change the circumstances of your life.
Do the women get referred more often, or do they come in on their own?
So it used to be we would get, referrals mostly from agencies. But now the women who graduate are our greatest ambassadors.
As referrals.
They're the ones that tell the story. And if you come to Women's Empowerment, we have the biographies of women of history on the front wall of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But on the rest of the 10,000 square feet, we have the biographies and the pictures of each woman who's graduated.
Oh, amazing.
And each morning, the new students, choose a biography to read. And it can be a woman of history, or it can be one of the graduates. Many times they know that person. Sometimes they were in recovery together. They were homeless together. Their kids were, and it's just a reinforcement that if they did it, I can do it too.
Mm-hmm. On the women of history, how many are there?
Gosh, I haven't counted, but probably about 50.
Okay. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 50 inspirational moments for anybody that's coming into the organization to see.
That's right.
What's going on.
That's right.
As well as the graduates,
as well as the graduates.
More and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a rough number of women that go through the program in the course of a year?
Okay, so we will serve, each class starts off with about 25 or 30 women. And each year we'll probably have about 70, 75 women who will graduate. But graduation's really just the beginning. Once they graduate, They are eligible for all sorts of services. So for example, last year we served 576 unduplicated women and 169 unduplicated children.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a lot of women you're helping through the programs.
Who are helping themselves.
So we have Robin sitting across from us who has gone through the program.
Yes, she has.
Robin, when did you go through?
Oh gosh, it seems like it's been forever now. I believe I graduated in September of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it was session 64.
So about 10 years ago,
Yeah.
which is great because that gives us some history to say, okay, what's
Yes.
happened in these last 10 years?
Yeah.
But before we get there, I'd like you to share what brought you to women's empowerment. How did you get to women's empowerment in the first place?
Oh gosh, yeah. So several years ago, when my husband and I were in college, trying to get our degrees and start our life off, he was suffering from a debilitating series of epileptic seizures that left him incapacitated. And we're working, college students, part-time jobs, not a lot of medical insurance and benefits and things like that. And at the time, he wasn't able to get access to the medications that he needed to, treat his condition. And so he literally almost lost his life. He did not know who he was, barely could recognize himself, me, all the things. He was completely out of it and incapacitated. So at that time, obviously, college had to be taken off the table. I had to take a leave of absence from the jobs I was working at that time to be a sole provider because I couldn't hire a nurse or anything like that. And he couldn't stay in a facility because we just didn't have the funds for that. So we had some savings, which was nice because that held us for a little bit. But as things got tougher, we had to end up selling everything that we owned. And by the time we were done with that, we were sleeping on the floor. And also, I was pregnant.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can imagine all the thoughts that went through my head during this time. I never thought that I would be in a situation like that. I never experienced being unhoused before. I was very nervous. And then on top of that, you're thinking about, okay, this life is coming into the world and I'm going to be responsible for this too. So I have a husband who basically can't function and I'm carrying a child and I'm scared out of my mind and just really spiraling into a state of depression and anxiety. But I'm very resourceful. So I did like go around the community seeking resources. I remember going to one community center in Sacramento and grabbing like all the flyers, the little tabs with the phone numbers. And I remember grabbing a bunch of those and just making tons of calls. And every door I was getting was like, we don't really have the resources. Shelters didn't have rooms open, or they had an opportunity. It was like a wait list and you wouldn't be on for like several months. I did have one shelter even say call every day and we'll have to let you know on a day by day basis. And so just wasn't getting anywhere with that. Some of the organizations did provide some small things like maybe some clothes, maybe some food, maybe a couple bus passes, something to maybe get you by for a day or two, but it was nothing significant to get out of the situation. And I know people usually have a stigma of folks who are experiencing homelessness, like they did something to be there or they made that choice and they don't want to get out of their circumstances. I definitely was not one of those people. And my husband and I desperately wanted to get out of the situation we were in, especially with a child coming. Well, fast forward a couple months, I did have that baby and it was getting harder and harder. And I ran into a friend of mine on the bus one day and she said, gosh, Robin, what's going on? And I kind of explained and broke down like all the things because I hadn't talked or seen that friend in a while. We actually went to college together. So it's quite embarrassing for me to actually say what was happening. But at that point, something just came over me like, I can tell her this. She's safe, And the first thing she came out of her mouth was like, you need to go find Lisa Culp. You need to find women's empowerment. This is where you can go. Please do that. And I was like, okay. And I was grateful for the information, but I did have that sinking feeling like, okay, here we go. Another place that's not really going to be able to help me, but I'm going to give it a try. I have this child here now with me and I do everything I can to make sure we have a better life. So I went down to women's empowerment and I was always taught to be very stoic, like pull yourself up from your bootstraps. I come from a very hardworking family, military. So all you can imagine the rules in place were like, we always do for ourselves and we always, get through these things. So I wanted to be strong and I wanted to take care of everything. And when I walked in there, I was on my last leg, to be quite honest. My depression had reached such a level of despair. I almost thought, if something doesn't happen in the next few months, I don't know. I felt like virtually might lose my marbles at some point, because the stress was unbearable.
Well, and you've also got, not only do you have the depression of the situation, the anxiety of the situation, you probably have some postpartum situation that you're dealing with as well.
I probably did. And at the time, I really didn't think about that too much. I was able to get a little bit of Medi-Cal for me and my son to cover us. And so the doctor's appointments were not that frequent. So I didn't really have, a chance to address that with the provider. But, looking back now, that probably was the case. I remember one doctor that I had before I had my son. I didn't have any money to catch the bus and I needed to go to OBGY appointment. And I was so determined to make that. I walked 40 blocks to that appointment. And the doctor was so kind that he gave me a little bit of money to get something to eat and catch the bus home, which I was truly grateful for. So when I walk into women's empowerment, I'm trying to be strong. I'm trying to be professional. And then there's wonderful woman at the front desk named Lois. I'll never forget her. Had the most beautiful smile. I mean, she just looked like she was an angel coming across that desk. And she looked at me and I think she could just tell I was just holding it like by a thread. And she said, look at me. And she pointed at a sign and right behind her, it said no shame zone. And she said, take a deep breath. And I was like, she said, when you come into this program, you will not be the same woman walking out that you are walking in. And that one moment that she said that, I finally got that first glimmer of hope. I finally felt like, okay, something's going to happen. And I felt like my whole body, when she asked me to take that breath, like my whole body and my whole soul, like took a breath. And that was the first time in months that I thought, oh, it's going to be okay. And to this day, when I talk about it, it's.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, I'm going to grab a tissue.
I can only imagine.
But from that point on, I had that hope and I rolled up my sleeves and I got to work. There was an interview that I had to go through to see if I was ready to commit to the program. And I think after about 2 minutes of talking to me, they saw that I was ready. They're like, this girl, yeah, we need to let her in. Please. Yeah, can you start today? So I started the very next week. And it was a 9-week job readiness program. And so I just wanted to prepare myself as much as possible. So anything they told me to do, any kind of, program study materials we had, I just relentlessly went through them, made sure I mastered everything they were telling me. When Intel came in on Fridays to help us with our computer skills, I took full advantage of that. And then all the wonderful enrichment classes that Lisa was talking about, they had yoga. And you can imagine you don't get a lot of time for self-care when you're in the house and struggling. So that was like a little piece of an hour of a day that I could just focus on myself and the things that I needed to take care of myself.
And where's your baby boy at the time?
He's in the daycare, actually.
Okay.
Yes. So
part of the program at Women's Empowerment.
Absolutely. Part of the wonderful things of that program was they have an on-site daycare. And they have programs there to help the children get through the stressors and things that they also go through, because you can imagine children experience a lot of trauma going through that situation. And fortunately, today I can say that my child doesn't remember any of these things, which I'm very grateful for. But I remember one of the child care providers sat down with me and they went through a report to see, because they assessed him to see where he was at with his markers. Mm-hmm. And they guided me through the process of things that we could do if he was falling short to help him, and where he was meeting his markers, to what we could do to facilitate and foster that. And I believe that was a huge turning point in his healing, because we had all of those resources, and I knew what to do. And I took parenting classes to help me. He is a very healthy and whole child, and I contribute a lot of that to those resources.
So as you're going through this program at the origin, what is the home life? Where are you living?
At that time, we did a lot of couch surfing. We had, I had one friend.
All three of you?
All three of us. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Just trying to make it day by day, figure out, how we're going to feed ourselves, if we're going to have a warm place to stay. And just trying to figure out stability on it was very day by day basis. Yeah.
Which I can only imagine the anxiety that you're dealing with going through that.
Yeah.
You have a husband who is somewhat incapacitated. You have a child that you have to take care of. And it's all on you, a baby, right? With diapers and formula and everything else that requires.
Yeah.
And all that burden is on you.
Yeah. It was a heavy load to carry. Yeah. And we stayed a few nights in a hotel too. So it was very overwhelming. It was very stressful, as you can imagine. And just, trying to focus on pulling your life back together when you have all these weights on you. You think, how can I do this? But being at Women's Empowerment, I had a whole bunch of cheerleaders and a whole bunch of people that supported me. I remember Lisa coming in on the first day of class and talking about what we're going to do in the program. But before that, she had lit a candle and we got to share some things like goals that we wanted to have. And we wrote a letter about where we wanted to see ourselves when we were finished with that program. And to this day, when I look at that letter, all of those things came true.
Some value in those goals and objectives and getting things set.
Yeah.
Was that all part of the 9-week program?
Yeah. The rolling up my sleeves and digging in was part of that 9-week program. And then the more holistic self-care portions were part of the enrichment courses after. So we had about a 3-hour day, Monday through Friday. And I caught a bus, 2 light rails, and a shuttle to get to class every day. And I was never late. We have a slogan at Women's Empowerment: if you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. And so I was always early to make sure I was on time. And it's located in a space that has a lot of unhoused people, unfortunately. That's the state they find themselves in. And so it wasn't always the safest street to walk on, but the security there, they would take a group of us women to make sure we got with our children safely to program every day. And once you stepped across that threshold, that gate of women's empowerment, you knew you were in a safe place and that you could focus on what you needed to do to get out of your situation.
Lisa, programs.
Mhm.
Talk about the programs. Talk about what happens in that 9-week course. What's the genesis? You start,
Mhm.
you come in a situation not unlike Robin. Does everybody have a child? Is it
73% of the women are single moms.
okay? So majority for
Majority.
sure.
Mhm.
And that's probably not always just a single child. It could be one or two or
Exactly.
many.
Mhm.
Okay. So they come into the program, they start the 9-week course. What transpires over the course of that 9 weeks? I see
So
you're smiling. So
I'm
yeah, because you know
smiling.
this program inside out, don't you? And I know Robin's, but you kind of got us going on it.
So I'm smiling because some of it just happens so organically. We have every day scheduled, and
Sure.
the majority of classes are taught by volunteers. The first week, we really spend setting the groundwork and the boundaries, and having the women get to know each other, and the staff getting to know the women, and creating that sense of safety.
Mhm.
Because most of them have not been in a safe place for a long time. Either because they're leaving domestic violence and they're having to choose. People say, well, they made bad choices. I'm not sure which is a good choice between staying in a violent relationship or becoming homeless or experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us intentionally make a bad choice.
No.
What I recognized from the point in time is we all could be only one catastrophe away from being homeless.
One
Robin's
catastrophe.
story is a perfect example
Right.
of that.
Yeah.
Some loved one requires significant medical care, or yourself.
Mhm.
Something happens. We just
And
don't
they were in
know.
their 20s. You don't
Right.
expect that.
Right. Okay, so go ahead.
So that first week, we do that. The second week, we start bringing in a lot of volunteers and people who are experts in their field. So we have a lot of HR people who will come in and, start talking to the women about resumes and cover letters and, building up to mock interviews, how to do a professional email. And then we start having some employers come in and talking about openings they may have or what they're looking for in a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And we have partners. For example, for the last couple of years, we've been partnering with Kaiser because Kaiser recognizes that they're going to have a deficit of allied healthcare positions between now and the next 5 years. And they're trying to make people more aware of what an allied healthcare position is, as well as start getting people interested in doing that. So it's tough to get in, but they are helping open some doors, that usually have people come in through environmental management, I believe is what it's called, which is all actually janitorial. And then you can start taking classes and getting certificates and kind of stacking those certificates to go into the field that you want to be in there. And one of our board members is from Kaiser, so she's also been very helpful in that. We have someone who comes in from the Northern California construction workers, and she's an electrician. And what we're looking for is, this job, this environmental management job at Kaiser pays $29 an hour.
Wow.
So it pays a whole lot more than cleaning people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is true with the construction worker jobs. These are jobs that you're going to actually be able to get housing with.
Mm-hmm.
We work with the women a lot on just their self-confidence. They need the skills to get a job, but unless they have enough confidence in themselves, they're not going to be able to convince an employer that they're going to be an asset to their team.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we do. One day I have them pick quotes that are all from women. And there are different quotes from Helen Keller and,
Maya Angelou,
and all those people.
Yeah.
But one of them that the women really appreciate is Tell the negative committee in your mind to sit down and shut up.
Love it.
I can't remember who wrote that. It was probably anonymous because women were frequently anonymous.
Uh-huh.
But as graduation gets closer, many of these women have never graduated from anything. Robin obviously had, but many of them hadn't. And so this is a big deal. And this is an opportunity where their friends and family can be proud of them, and they can be proud of themselves. Their children can be proud of them. So we make a beautiful ceremony, and we don't tell the moms, but their kids after the women receive their certificates, and they've all gotten up and spoken and talked about the changes that have happened in their life and where they're at, and if they've gotten a job or how many interviews they've gone on, just, whatever success they've made. They share that, and they're proud of it. And some of the women who've never touched a computer before, they talk about the computer skills that they can do. They can now do a PowerPoint. They can do a vision board on PowerPoint. I don't even know how to do that. So I need to sit in on that.
Do as I say, not as I do, okay?
Intel tells them what to do. And they have been part of women's empowerment since almost the very beginning. And every Friday they show up with volunteers and really work, especially with those who have the most fear, but also those who can move more quickly, individualizing the course so that they can, everybody can move at their own pace. And graduation is a really special moment. The women all speak. They get their certificates, and they'll get their certificates from Intel. They'll get certificates from Women's Empowerment. They'll get certificates if they attended 5 of the 7 afternoon classes. So they'll get a certificate from UC Davis Extension. They'll get a certificate from the Family Justice Center. And all of these things are especially important. The parenting class. They'll get these certificates. And if, for example, they have lost custody of their children, these are things that they're doing that are above and beyond what CPS has asked them to do. And in the last session, we had a woman who did not have custody of her children, and she'd been working really hard on getting custody. And it was hard to find a place where she could do supervised visits. So the classes end at 3. So I said, you're welcome to have visits in the Child Development Center from 3 o'clock on any day of the week. And so her CPS worker would come, and she would have her 3 children in there, and she would play with them. And I would put it on my calendar to go sit in and talk to him and just tell him what a wonderful job she was doing. She was turning in all of her deliverables. She was on time. She was focused. It was, she was overcoming a lot of barriers to be there, but she was doing it. And in large part, she was doing it for her children so that they could be together again. And we have this job bell that when people get a job or unify with their children or get into housing or whatever success it happens to be, they come back and they ring that bell and they share those successes with the current students and give them hope that if they could do it,
so can I.
So can I. And at the very end of graduation, all of the women's children bring up a flower to their moms. And there's not a dry eye in the house. Because,
I can only imagine.
The teachers and the volunteers have to carry a lot of them because they are infants. Some of the kids don't miss school that day and they come. But there's about 150 people who are in attendance to watch them graduate and to hear people talk about how wonderful and how hard it is. It takes a lot to show up every day from 9 to 3. As Robin was saying, early is on time is late. And if you're at a job, late is fired.
Right.
So everything we do is to practice those habits that will lead them to being successful in work.
There's more to come from Lisa and Robin following these few short messages from those we appreciate for making this program possible.
I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. We're dedicated to supporting nonprofit organizations who advocate for the strength, resilience, and vitality of those they serve. When nonprofit organizations thrive, our community does too. By supporting the Nonprofit Podcast Network, Five Star Bank is amplifying the voices and meaningful impact of our nonprofit community. We're Five Star Bank, a trusted nonprofit partner. How can we help you?
We are really excited to be part of the family and contribute to the work that you all are doing. CORE provides fractional and interim executive services, along with comprehensive back office solutions that go into our client sites and do the work to give them the capacity they need in order to move through transitions, whether that's planned or unplanned. Or companies also work with our accounting and finance, back office solutions, human resources, technology, and administration. The reason why our back office solutions add value is because we save them time and money, anywhere from 20 to 30% of what they would spend on that back office solution. We work in it so they can actually work on it. CXORE.com and contact me directly at DTEAT@CXORE.com.
If you're interested in learning more about how CORE may help your organization, visit CXORE.com.
Hello, this is Scott Thomas with Cap Trust in our Sacramento office. I specialize in working with local nonprofits and associations. Annually, we survey private and public nonprofit organizations across the country to better understand challenges they see in today's environment. In our more recent survey, we heard concerns about proper board governance, mission-aligned investment, and how to implement alternative investments. If you would like a copy of the survey or to discuss your organization, look me up, Scott Thomas at captrust.com.
I'm thrilled to have Western Health Advantage partnering with us as they do so much to support so many nonprofit agencies in our community. As a truly local health plan, you'll find individual and family options, employer options, plans for CalPERS and Medicare Advantage. From medical services to pharmacy, health and wellness support, as well as behavioral health care, Western Health Advantage has a plan that fits what you need. As an employer, for profit or nonprofit business, individual or family, you can find more at westernhealth.com.
So, Robin, at the end of the coursework, then what?
Yeah, well, like Lisa said, that's when the real work begins, right? Because now we need to go back and stabilize our families and get jobs and get housing and do all of that stuff. So women's empowerment was instrumental in me reaching those goals. First, the housing component. Getting on wait lists for affordable housing was a big deal, and they had people there that could help me with those resources. And then they had an internship program, which I didn't know at the time, but I found out later that it was a pilot program with Assemblymember Kevin McCarty. He's a huge supporter of women's empowerment, has been a champion in that area, supporting this organization. He would give us certificates at graduation, and they were really fancy from the state assembly. So we were all very proud when we received them. But he wanted to do more. And so he opened up his office to do an internship, one in the Capitol office and one in his district office for 3 months. And hopefully during that time, we would get training. We would be able to put that on our resume for a reference. We would get a letter of recommendation and hopefully, be able to procure for ourselves a state, city, county, some kind of stability, right? A really, good job to put us back on that pathway. So I went into that interview and I was able to get the internship.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I was very excited. And one of the services that Women's Empowerment provides is a clothing closet, because at that time I didn't have anything really to wear to a job interview. So it was really wonderful being able to go in there and get a really nice outfit and jewelry and makeup and the things that I would need to, really look good and feel my best. So I went in there with a lot of confidence. One of the things I shared with him was my passion for community. So he thought I'd be a good fit in his district office. So I started interning there, and I kept those words in my head about, being on time is early, being late, or being on time is late, right? And being early is on time, and being late is fired, right? And definitely didn't want that last one. Definitely didn't want to be fired.
Because this is a paid internship.
It's a paid internship, yes. So that was also a gift. So during that time, I was able to take advantage of that opportunity, and I just worked incredibly hard. Whatever they needed, I was always early. If they needed support in anything, I was the first one to volunteer and raise my hand. I asked, what can I do to be of service to you guys? And every time before I left, I would talk to my supervisor and, ask them if there's anything that they saw that I could improve on, or, just anything that I could help with other than what I was already being assigned. So I really wanted them to know that I was very, grateful for this opportunity, and I really wanted to do my best. And women's empowerment, I wanted to make sure I did a good job for them because I wanted the reputation to be stellar, because I knew that other women would be able to come through this program as well. So towards the end of that internship, I'm looking for jobs, ready to get that letter of recommendation, all the things. And my supervisor pulled me in the office, asked me how I was liking it here, and I shared what I enjoyed about the position. And at the end of that conversation, I was able to get another interview with the member, and I was offered a full-time position as a district field representative.
Oh, how wonderful.
With full medical benefits.
How wonderful.
Yeah.
For your entire
For
family.
my entire family. And so the gratitude that I had was unmeasurable. It was the big first step to getting my stability back. And my husband was able to see neurologists and get the treatment that he needed and the medications, and he made a full recovery. And
my goodness.
Yes. Yeah, it was a miracle. And he was able to go back to school and finish his degree. And he is now a high school math teacher. He teaches statistics and calculus and some other math classes, I don't know. But he is a pillar in his community and loved by his students and his colleagues where he teaches, and is doing a remarkable job in education.
And you now have a 16-year-old, 12-year-old?
Oh, no, not that old.
How old?
He just turned 10 in January.
Oh, 10. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. So I was able to work for Assembly Member now Mayor McCarty for several years, and I enjoyed every aspect of that job and gained so much from that opportunity. But when my husband finished, I got the opportunity to go back to school myself. So I am now in a master's program at Sac State. So I was able to finish my undergraduate education. So we were made whole and came back to that complete space of where we were when we left off. So now my son has 2 first-generation college graduates for parents with postgraduate degrees.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is just amazing.
And
Lisa,
a
you have to
4.0.
look, and I know you're not the only women's empowerment graduate or alumni who has done this.
Absolutely
You're
not.
one of many who have been successful in the program that have come out and integrated back into the community successfully.
Exactly. And even with the state assembly, there were a few women that came in after me, which are still at the state assembly. So that's just a testament to how much that program is really, what I notice about women's empowerment is that they make sure they meet their mission. They're not just an organization that says we're going to do these things. They show the proof that we're going to do these things. And there's so many different stories, like you said, of many women who have gone on to own their own businesses, have gotten their college degrees, have gotten really wonderful jobs. And one of the things that did amaze me when I walked in that first day was when I looked in, I saw all the faces on the wall, hundreds and hundreds of women who were smiling and looking happy, and they're sharing their stories. And that was a really powerful moment to me because it showed me that it worked. It wasn't
Something
just on
good
paper.
happens here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's real.
So, Lisa, collaboration. Obviously, you don't do this alone.
No.
And you already mentioned some of the domestic violence organizations that you might collaborate with. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like for the organization.
So with organizations, a lot of times it's referrals. But for example, with the Family Justice Center, which is a domestic violence,
Yes.
they teach the domestic violence learning and support group in the afternoon.
Okay.
They can help women. I mean, I walked into the parking lot this morning to get out of my car and go to work, and one of the students who's in this current class stopped and she said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And she had blood on her shirt. She had everything she owned in her car. She said, "He just started beating me again." And I knew I had to leave. And so having the Family Justice Center do the domestic violence, we have that connection. It's, they work with the courts, they work with the DA, they work, and so that's good to have. We also, we have partnerships with the shelters. It's very hard to get into shelters. But I also know that almost every night there's at least 1 or 2 beds open. And so if that's something I have to do, I have a relationship with those partners, and I'll give them a call.
Begging for beds.
Begging for beds. Begging for beds. And, then there's the employer partnerships. And, obviously Assemblymember McCarty was. We're working with him now to do that with the city. And we have apprenticeships like with Grid Alternatives, which is a solar energy company. And with NCCT, they have an apprenticeship program. And the women don't have to pay for that, and we'll pay for the stipend for them. We have a partnership with the Institute of Real Estate Management, which is our property management training program, which I love because once they get a job in property management, they frequently get housing on site because that benefits the company as well, because they've got somebody on site 24 hours,
Right.
not just 8. So we work really hard to have those employer partnerships and then housing partnerships. We get everybody on affordable housing lists, but those are really long waits.
I've heard from everybody that's in there, they just can't build enough.
They can't.
And as soon as they're built, they're full.
That's very true. Yeah.
And, in the B, there was a statistic a couple of years ago that just said homelessness has increased by 153% from 2018 to 2023. Housing is increased by 30%.
Easy math. Right?
Maybe her husband can do that math, but
Yeah.
I haven't figured out anybody else that can.
Yeah.
And so meeting landlords and, working again with the Institute of Real Estate Management, who are landlords that you work with that are willing to, give somebody a second chance. And then we work with them to help build their credit, to start their savings. We partner with Safe Credit Union, and they'll come down and they'll start with budgeting and then credit and building your credit. And at the end, they'll come in and open up accounts for people who want it. And because it's a for-profit and not a nonprofit, it makes it feel good it makes me feel that the women are in safe hands or in good hands.
Yes.
And then, we've now started our own transitional workforce housing, which was a big step. It was really pretty much the first time we took any government money. In part because HUD defines homelessness differently than I see it in women and children. Couch surfing wouldn't have counted.
Oh.
So we use the definition that the Department of Education uses, which does count couch surfing, and which does count when women have to exchange favors with somebody to get a roof over their head and their children's head. I mean, I can't think of anything more degrading.
Right.
But these women are willing to do whatever it takes to keep their children safe. And I had one little boy come up to me and say, "How come when my mommy stays at Mr. Mike's house, she doesn't sleep with me?" And I just said, "You know what, sweetheart? What I know is that your mommy is working so hard to have a place for just the two of you. And then she'll be there with you every day and every night." What answers do you give to a question like that?
Right.
Yeah. So
And
partnerships are a huge piece.
And so often that is the beginning of substance abuse.
Exactly.
For a variety of different reasons, whether it be escape or if it just be to
numb the pain,
or to keep yourself up at night so that nothing happens.
That's
and
exactly
sleep during
right.
the day, and just it's a cascade of bad events that in many cases were not choices.
Right.
Yeah.
They weren't choices. Wow.
And that's why when we talk to the women about that, because it wasn't really a choice, they know now they can make a choice.
Correct.
And they do.
And you've built that confidence to where the choice is a good one. And they see
and
it.
it helps them further their goals.
And they have mentors.
Right.
Yeah.
They can reach out and they can have that conversation with a Robin.
Right.
Yes, we are definitely a sisterhood. If you go anywhere and you see a woman that's graduated from women's empowerment and you did never see her on, she's in a different class, it's an instant connection and you want to do whatever favors you can for them. during the big crisis of COVID, there were a lot of people that had lost employment. And a lot of those were my sisters in women's empowerment and, the EDD crisis. Well, I happened to work for the assembly member, so I could assist in that way. So I was gathering lists of names of them so I could, make phone calls and help facilitate and at least get them a phone call or somebody to talk to somebody at EDD that could assist them to help them work out whatever it was so they could get the benefits they needed to stay housed or get housing and, feed their kids.
And I'm sure every one of your graduates has that same mentality of, I will support the woman coming up in any way, shape, or form that I can.
And at graduation, every day we light a candle and they share a goal. It's part of the goal development process. And, they learn about SMART goals and they learn about, action plans. But at graduation, it's a brand new candle that comes out and they light it to celebrate their success, but they also light it so that it's a light in the darkness for women and children who are still out there. And, they kind of send it out so that it will bring women to where they want and need to be.
Let's talk a little bit about funding. How are you funded?
So 50% of our funding comes from individual contributions or family foundations or grants.
Wow. Good for you.
Yes. Chris Delaney, who was one of the founders of Loaves and Fishes, once told me when I was working at Mary House and was getting ready to start women's empowerment.
25 years ago.
25 years ago.
She said, just remember, the bank of the community, the bank of faith, is far more reliable than the bank of the government.
Sage words of advice.
Sage words of advice. We've had to pivot many times because the world changes and resources change. And the funding that we got for this transitional workforce housing program was through COVID money, the American Rescue Plan Act. It sunsets December 31st, 2026. It was a 3-year grant. We're in conversations with the landlord there about continuing to rent it because we're looking for a place where the women can be together and support each other, help with childcare, all of that kind of stuff. We're also looking for alternative funding sources. We have an application in process for CalAIM, which seems from everybody that I've talked to like a really wonderful program that comes from the hospitals and healthcare plans because it's less expensive for them to partner with a nonprofit to do all of this work to get people into housing and, into work so that they can be healthier. And these social determinants of health are real. And if they're out on the street and they don't have any income, Robin's husband couldn't get an appointment with a neurologist. He could only get the emergency room.
Right.
So I think they've really realized that it's a good investment for them, and they're partnering with lots of nonprofits, and we hope that we'll be one of them because it's also a reimbursable grant, but you get reimbursed for a whole series of different services, many of which we're already providing. And I think that's what's really important in terms of funding is look for funding that pays for what you're already doing rather than that mission creep where, well, I can get this money if we start doing this. Our mission has 3 parts. One is to help the women with the skills and confidence to get a good job. Second part is to create a healthy life. And the third part is to gain secure housing, safe, stable housing for themselves and for their children. So all of that fits. And, focusing on, the Child Development Center, not just childcare, but child development, because children who are experiencing homelessness are 4 times more likely to have developmental delays and emotional disorders than even children living in low-income housing. And so if we can help them meet those milestones now, that will boost them being able to start their educational career not behind.
And the burden it relieves on the community
Yes.
in all the resources,
In
whether
all
it
the
be medical,
resources.
whether it be in childcare, whether it be in mental wellness and health. My goodness, if everyone that has the ability to gainfully employ is one less that we don't have to worry about.
That's right.
And add in children, 1, 2, 3, whatever that number is.
And childcare is so expensive.
Yes.
Outrageously expensive.
Yes. And we hear that so often. The sad part is somebody gets engaged, they get a good employment, they start going, and they have childcare support subsidized. Great. They hit the threshold. Great, I got a raise, and now I'm making this much. Guess what? There goes your childcare. Now you're worse
Making
off
less.
Yes.
because of the childcare than you were when you were subsidized and supported. And so people, unfortunately, stay in roles that are beneath their capability and skill set simply because of the childcare.
Yeah.
Because they need those benefits, those health
Correct.
benefits and the childcare benefits.
Right. If money were no object, what would it look like? What would you see?
I would see this big, huge space of land where we would build 200 units of affordable, supportive housing with a community center in the middle where ongoing classes could be taught, where there was computers for people to use who couldn't afford them right away. There would be places where the children could run and play and climb trees and do all of those healthy things that children need. And just continue to buoy their success going forward. Our ultimate goal is to alleviate the trauma of homelessness and end homelessness one woman, one family at a time.
To work ourselves out of jobs. And after 25 years, I'm sure you're probably thinking, there's a point in time where I can't continue to do this, so let's hurry up and get this problem fixed, right?
Right now.
Let's see. Mayor McCarty, is he listening, do you think?
Well, if he is, I would like to thank him for everything he's done for this tremendous organization and encourage him to just stay in there with us with his ongoing support.
And I like that, Robin. For those who are just listening, Robin looked right at the camera when she made that statement. So that is for Mayor McCarty. And thank you, too, for his support.
I'm very grateful.
We do.
Yeah, for Mayor McCarty.
Significantly appreciate that. Greatest need today?
I think what any nonprofit organization would tell you is we need stellar staff who deeply believe in the mission and deeply care about and for the people they're serving. Volunteers, because their need is too great to do it on our own. And volunteers and staff who will, execute these programs with excellence and integrity, and love. I mean, I know sometimes we shy away from that word, but it takes so little love for people to begin to feel like they matter. And therefore, they're willing to take risks that they weren't willing to take before. And then finally, money. People need to be paid. And nonprofits are notorious for not being able to pay people enough. Programs, I mean, in our last audit, 84% of our revenue went directly to services. That's a high percentage. 9% went to admin and 7% went to fundraising. So we probably need to add a little more to fundraising so we can get some more money.
Well, and I'm a believer. You've seen it for 25 years. This was a small business 25 years ago. Today, what's the budget?
$2.4 million.
That's not a small business.
No,
you are a significant business, and it needs to be run like a business.
Right.
And most businesses don't run at an 84% margin. I mean, it's crazy to think that nonprofits are held to a different standard when, in fact, they are a business. They should be run like a business. And if you can commit to fundraising to grow the business, that's a win.
That's a win for everybody.
Correct. And we know no money, no mission.
No money, no mission.
So
absolutely,
that's the essence of what needs to happen. And now that you are graduating all these women through the program, they're understanding it from a different perspective. they see the value of the nonprofit, but they're the same women who can now support and give back.
And they do. We have graduates that are donors.
Love it.
Yes. I love it.
Isn't that the penultimate of it all?
We have a graduate that is the president of our board of directors.
Is this Robin sitting across from me? Are you pointing at her?
I am.
Yes, that would be me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been an amazing experience. And to be real honest about it, when I first joined the board, I had no idea what it took behind the scenes to run this organization. I thought it was just this magical, whimsical thing that was wonderful. And, all these people in the community just band together, but it is a lot of work.
How about that dose of reality, right?
Yes. And it takes a lot of resources to keep the doors open. And so it's been one of the best moments of my life to be able to give back. I always joke with Lisa, I don't think I ever could repay you for all of the gifts that I've gotten from this program, but it's definitely one, way I can make an impact. And, it's really interesting too, because I think the first graduate that's ever been chair of the board. Right. So that is an amazing, reflection for me just on the journey of how far it's come for me and my family and for, this organization. And, to tell you the truth, if I would have heard somebody say that to me when I walked in that door that day, I probably would have laughed them down the street. But it has been such a transformative experience. I've grown so much in all the roles that I've had. I started out as just a board member, then the secretary, and now the chair. And what I have realized is that the people on our board are some of the most compassionate, passionate, dedicated community people that you could ever find. They are so invested in this mission and they contribute so much, but we still need more.
Always.
And so we're always out there trying to share the message and the mission and to let people know about this organization. And one thing I will say, I've never seen anything like it in the Sacramento community. I've never seen the well-rounded, impactful services that are so holistic, and the results. The results are phenomenal. And I truly believe that women's empowerment is, significant to its name. It's not a place women just come to survive. It's a place women and children come to thrive.
Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. The organization's grown from nothing to multi-million dollars. That's no small feat in itself. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've got all these women you've put out into the community who are grateful recipients of what you've done. Somewhere along the line, Lisa takes a break, relaxes, refreshes, does something because you can't maintain the weight of the nonprofit all the time. No. So what is it you do for fun?
I love spending time with my family. I love to hike. I love to be outdoors in nature, travel. I haven't gotten to travel very far lately. I did a lot of traveling when I was younger.
Well, Nicaragua for
10 years. And then language school in Bolivia. And I studied in France for a year,
Oh, France just threw me off. I would say your Spanish is great, but then you said France?
Yes. And my dad was a physician in the military. And so we lived in Germany for a couple of years and I learned to speak German. So, yes. So I do. I enjoy languages. I enjoy reading. I have 2 amazing grandchildren. My son took a job in Atlanta. He's in public health and project management. So the CDC's there. Mm-hmm. And so he and his wife went there. They bought a house, 5 bedrooms and, this on a third of an acre.
Room for grandma.
But when they decided to have a second child, they knew they wanted to be near family. And so about a year and a half ago, they came back.
Congratulations.
Mm-hmm. And in 1 month, they bought a house, moved, had the second baby, and my son got a new job at Sutter.
Ah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then there's a greater need for grandma.
That's right. So I've got a 4-year-old little girl who is just strong and empowered. Watch out, world.
I wonder where she learned that from.
I was saying, I can see the pose already.
Yeah, she does it. Yes.
Yes.
And I have a 9-month-old grandson.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So that they just bring so much joy and light to my life.
Lisa, where would somebody go to learn more about the organization? What's the best way to find out what women's empowerment is all about?
Certainly, you can go to our website, and it's got lots of information on there, and information for people who are experiencing homelessness, information for people who want to volunteer, information for people who want to donate, whether that's clothing for our professional clothing closet or, financial resources. And you can also just give us a call and say, I'd like to come down and see this amazing space that has 2,000 women on the wall and this wonderful child development center that, 0 to 5-year-old children are there to play and to learn and take their first steps. And, I love giving tours. We've got so many phenomenal stories that, come from the tours that I'm happy to give tours.
And the big wall of the 200 houses that are going to be built.
That's right. I got to put that up.
Yes.
I got to put that up.
Where's your
need a vision board?
I was just going to say, where's her vision board?
Yes,
Exactly.
that's right. I've done vision boards before, but not on PowerPoint.
Right.
Yes, that's a good one to put up. That's my commitment. I will put that up.
And we have our annual gala.
So
That's every year. It takes place at what time? When is it?
In September.
Okay.
And we're celebrating, the first celebration for the 25th anniversary is next week. And
we're recording this in March of 2026.
Okay, so it'll be in March of 2026, March 19th. And then we will have an event with all of the graduates and their children. And we'll probably, rent out space at a park.
To celebrate over 100 sessions now of women's empowerment.
100, we're just graduating 102 and we'll start 103.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? So that website is womens-empowerment.org.
Yes.
And we'll put that in the show notes as well as the number. If people want to call, we'll see if that is an engagement of some way, shape, or form.
Right. And, my extension is 102 and they can call me. I'll answer.
Perfect.
We have a customer training program going on at the front desk. So if you don't get through there, call my extension.
Well,
transferring calls is a learned skill.
Right. And I'm sure we all got this automation thing that goes on that everybody hates, but it's a cost-saving thing. AI will get better. It'll get better. It'll get better. Right. What you have done with women's empowerment over the course of the last 25 years and the product that you are producing, to see somebody like Robin sitting across from me who was on the verge of a really horrific situation.
Yes, very much so.
Because, Lord knows where that could have gone. To where it would be a very different situation today.
Yeah.
And the many, many women that have come through the organization to you and your team, it is just amazing the dignity that you are providing for these women and the stability and the ability to make me cry too. Stop this.
It's an amazing journey. When I look at my son now, he's doing so well.
Yeah.
He's on 2 sports teams. He's in chess club. He's in computer programming club. He's been in Cub Scouts.
Awesome? And he's got a bunch of cousins who are women's empowerment cousins.
Exactly.
Lots of them.
Yeah. He even went to elementary school with one of the babies he was in the daycare with.
Yeah.
And his mother was in my class. So we graduated together.
That's the reason you do what you do.
That's right.
And I can only imagine the pride you have when you look at somebody like Robin, who now is your board chair.
Who is my boss?
I was just going to say, she's your boss.
How did that happen?
Right?
She's doing my performance evaluation in a few weeks.
In fact.
And the best part of that is, look at what's happened. You've taught so well, and the program has been so impactful that it can produce your board chair.
Yeah.
And, for that, we're grateful. So thank you.
I'm grateful because I feel like I have the best job in the whole world because I get to watch this arc of transformation.
Yeah.
Where women start off feeling hopeless and broken and victims. And in many cases, ways, they are.
Truly are.
They
yes.
truly are.
Absolutely.
And by the end, they declare at graduation that, I am no longer the victim of the circumstances of my life. I am the author.
Yes.
Of my story and my life going forward.
And what a beautiful book that is.
Yes. Thank you for letting me write such a beautiful story for my family's life.
Thank you for all you did to make it happen.
And on that, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. We hope today's episode inspired you and gave you a deeper look into the work of our local nonprofits. If you believe in our mission to amplify their voices, please take a moment to leave us a positive review and share this episode with a friend. It helps more people discover the incredible work happening in our community. And don't miss future episodes. Subscribe to our weekly updates and monthly newsletter at nonprofpod.com. And if you're part of a nonprofit that would like to be featured, we'd love to hear from you. Just visit the Guests tab on our website. The Nonprofit Podcast Network is recorded and produced at Hear Me Now Studio with generous support from our outstanding partners. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations, online at captrust.com. Western Health Advantage, local care with community impact. Find the plan that fits at westernhealth.com. CORE, executive leadership and comprehensive support services. Visit cxore.com. And 5 Star Bank, a local trusted advisor to community nonprofits for over 25 years. 5starbank.com.